Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, wherever you might be, or I don't know, maybe evening someplace else. But let's take a dive back into the past, okay? Because like the questions and stuff that I was putting in a group or the discussions and stuff, people are like, where are you finding these words from and what do they mean? And that tells me that you don't know your MFT history. So we need to know our MFT history in order for us to understand the words that we know now when we see them. All of those fancy terms, Meritus, Schism, and skew, and cybernetics, first order cybernetics, second order cybernetics, it's from the history of the MFT field. And we first need to understand where they come from, what do they actually mean, right? So the history of MFT was like flooded with schizophrenia. If you've read it, you would know almost half of it is like has to do with schizophrenia, and it paved the way for how we look at some of these the ways of systemic thinking as of now. So if we take a look at Gregory Bateson and the Palo Alto group, they were the ones that suggested that schizophrenia symptoms is created due to the contradicted messages that come across in our communications. It's the constant contradicted messages that we have, that we hear, that we say, which is why schizophrenia was created in a person, right? So you take the classic example of come hug me, but then you get a rejecting tone by that. They believe that the rejected messages that they may have also with the message receiving created schizophrenia, right? It's all about how you communicate. Theodore Litz is the one that identified the marital dynamics in the families with schizophrenia. That's your marital schism, which is the conflict, but your marital skew is which one of the partners dominates, right? But then you have Ludwig. He's your what? He's the foundation to systemic thinking in regards to your systemic models. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Okay? Now, let's take a look at this. Now, the double bind theory, that's Bateson, that's Jackson, that's Haley, and that's Weakland, right? And again, these are the names that we're just like, well, who are these people? The theorists that we are so familiar with are the ones that worked with these theorists in the past, right? Schizophrenia developed from repeated exposure to the contradictory communication patterns in a relationship between the parent and that child, right? And then a double bind happens when it's two or more conflicting messages given on different levels, the verbal and the nonverbal. The person cannot comment on it or they cannot resolve it. That's where your whole damned if you do, damned if you don't comes from. The two contradicting messages, that's where it comes from. A woman tells her husband, you used to buy me flowers all the time in the beginning. He shows up with those nice, beautiful red roses that you like, and you turn to him and you say, well, why did you do that anyways? Because you only did it because I said something to you. You only did it because I mentioned it. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Do you want the roses that you used to get or not? Those are your two contradictory messages. The husband is now left with no way out of the situation, even though he just spent all the money on these roses and you still complained about it in the first place, right? That's your double bind. That's your contradicting communication form that you'll get, and that is what was told. That's the reason why schizophrenia was created in the family. Okay, now we have the marital schism and the marital skew. The marital schism is your severe conflict, right? Chronic overt conflict, right? Where it's just like, it's known, it's out there. I'm just going to say it to you and I don't care, right? That's your schism. But then your marital skew is when one partner dominates. One parent is clearly going to be the dominant one, controlling, dysfunctional, rigid, there's no way, shape, or form how we're going to do things differently, because what I say is going to go. I'm the dominant one. But then the other parent is more like submissive. They're passive and they're just going to do whatever it is that they're supposed to do, what the other dominant spouse is telling them to do. But when that occurs, it's a distorted balance that happens, right? One person's ways of thinking, how they view things, how they feel things should be, dominates the family's life. So then what happens when that child that is witnessing that grows up, right? So you're going to think of a schism as being a split. The parents are at war with each other. It's overt conflict. And the child is torn between which one they need to be siding with. Because to the child, they're at war with each other. They're like honestly arguing with each other. Which one do I go to, right? But then when you think of a skew, think of that balance that you have. One person dominant and the other one is going to submit, but it's going to create a distortion. Because when that child sees that, then what happens? There's a pattern that's going to continue to happen and it's going to be passed down, right? Okay, now, this is, I had these two terms. I remember seeing these two terms and I got messages from people. What are these? Where are you getting this stuff from? What is it? Where are you getting it from? How do I study it? This is your history. Again, this is your history of MFT. So if you have not read your history of MFT, go back and read it so that you can have a better understanding. And even if these words or terms are not going to be on the exam, they might have them in answer responses and you'll be able to know to cross it out because you know what they mean, right? So when you look at the pseudo-mutuality, right, the family appears to be close to each other. They're harmonious. They're just this beautiful family, right? But it appears that way. But it's not real. It's fake. They've suppressed a lot of the conflict that they have, and it's hidden. It looks as if this family is all together. They're just this beautiful, harmonious system that they have, but there is no authentic communication between them. Right? You take a look at the example of a child will tell them like, oh, I want to be maybe a football player when I get older. But then the family is going to like laugh it off. They're going to dismiss it, think it's a joke because that's what they're used to. That's what they know. Because they've suppressed a lot of the things that they believe and the thoughts of like, hey, I can support my child. They don't do it. But it's meant to be to maintain harmony. But at the same time, it's not. It's actually harming the child. Now, then there's also the other one, the pseudo hostility. And I remember when I was studying, I kind of struggled with trying to find the differences between the two of these, but pseudo mutuality, again, the conflict is hidden. A lot of the things that they feel, they think about, it's going to be suppressed, but on the outside, it's going to look like it's just this beautiful, rosy, and harmonious family that they have. Pseudo hostility is the families that are going to show it. The bickering, the yelling, the screaming. I don't like you. I hate you. You make me so sick. You get on my nerves. But they are hiding the fear of being close to their family. The bickering covers up their deeper feelings of intimacy that they have for their other family members. Right? And when you take a look at pseudo mutuality, it's kind of like the opposite, right? And even when you take a look at the example of the siblings that constantly tease or mock each other instead of having some of those vulnerable conversations. Now, I think my sister and I do this a lot too. And I too, my sister and I speak on my twin sister and I, because it was just the two of us. A lot of my older siblings are way older than Kelly and I. My twin sister's name is Kelly, and we grew up in a home where what I just discussed about the Meritus schism and the Meritus skew, where we grew up in a home where my father dominated a lot of the things. My mother was the submissive one, and then the older that we got, we kind of like conform to it because we witnessed our own mother go through it. And I do think that some of the times now we even engage in some of the pseudo mutuality and some of the pseudo hostility sometimes, where it's like, I can be vulnerable with you, I can, but I don't want to, because I know I can purposely like upset you, piss you off, and it's kind of like satisfying at some point, but then it's not, because it's like it comes from a place of hurt, if that makes sense. And even with the pseudo mutuality, the same thing, where it's like, oh, this is what I want to do, and oh, that's funny, or it's just like, girl, go somewhere and sit down and leave me alone, I don't want to hear that. But we could go out and we would look like this family that is just like beautiful, and we're happy with each other, but it was hidden. A lot of the things that we went through was hidden. And even now, the constant bickering, the constant teasing, talking about each other, can we say it's a form of how we show love to each other? We can, but to Lyman, it's pseudo hostility, where you bicker, you tease one another, because you are disguising your true feelings or your closeness that you have with your family members. I hope that makes sense, because again, in order to understand a lot of these terms, a lot of these theories, you apply it to your own family. Find a way to apply it to your own family. Just like the communication deviance one, you know, it's the fragmented communication styles that you may have in the families of schizophrenia, but then you think about it, we didn't have schizophrenia in my family. Could we have developed schizophrenia compared to what Gregory Bateson and the rest of them believe? I mean, sure. I mean, but when you think about it, the best way to learn and understand is to apply. And just like I just talked about my family, apply it to yours. Find those connections, get those understandings, so that your brain starts to speak a different language. And I'm gonna rest on that. So again, then we have Frida. She's the schizophreniogenic mother, where she believed that the controlling, the overprotection, and the rejecting mother would lead to the development of schizophrenia, right? And you know, her theory, and I know I read it and I learned it, and I'm understanding it, where it's just like, oh, she placed a lot of blame on the women. The mother was the blame for a lot of things, and she was actually criticized for it, which is why her theory was kind of like debunked. It was not true. They could not find any evidence that that's the reason as to why a child could have schizophrenia, due to the rejecting mother, you know, right? And then the father being the one that's like not there, dismissive or whatever, which would cause schizophrenia. So the field of MFT came a long way from identifying the theories and the claims of how schizophrenia is created amongst the family, but to how we look at it now, it's a way big different viewpoint on that. And then we have Heinz Cahoot. So this is your backstory of narcissism. Now, he believed that narcissism was a part of a child growing up, and you should have been telling your child, you know, oh, you're a good person, you should admire your child. It was actually healthy, according to him, but he believed that people needed relationships with others. It was called self-object, and this is your self-psychology. Self-psychology is actually on the California exam, but that's okay, because it's best to know it anyways, because he's the reason as to why we look at narcissism as a personality disorder, right? So there's two main objects needed in childhood, and that was the idealization and mirroring effect that he talked about. The caregiver was supposed to reflect admiration and validate the child's worth, how they are, the things that they want to do in life. But the idealization part is that the child looks up to the caregiver that does what? Admires and validates the child's worth. When those needs are met, the mirroring and the idealization, the child then develops a healthy sense of self, which is resilient, right? If those needs are not met, the child then is going to develop a part of themselves which is going to be fragmented because they didn't receive what they were supposed to get as a child. That leads them to having narcissistic personality disorder. If they didn't receive that admiration as a child, when they get older, they're going to seek it and they're going to have to try their best to receive it by any means necessary. This is why we have, when a person is diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, they are the best thing since sliced bread, honey. And they are that way because in their childhood, the parents didn't tell them that they were. That's the whole theory of how narcissism was created. Children naturally need to see themselves as this person who is just awesome, amazing, admired, special. That's going to create that person to, when they grow up and get older, they're going to be this person, this self that is resilient. They have a huge self-worth. Their self-esteem is right where it's supposed to be. But if they don't receive it, they're going to try to get it from anybody else, any means necessary. That's your theory of narcissism. Heinz Cahoot is the one that started that. So my ending words to each and every one of you is to think systemically. And the way that you think systemically is you have to have an understanding of the concept, how it originated, what it looks like, what does it teach, what does it entail when you come to thinking systemically. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. No one person is the cause for some of these disabling sequences, none of these interactions that continues to occur, right? You take a look at what we just discussed. This is your whole basis of the history of where some of these terms that we were looking at this week and where they came from, right? So your general systems theory is the foundation for our systemic models that we use today. Strategic therapy, structural therapy, it's the basis of it. And when you have a clear understanding of GST, the systemic theory, you can apply it to any question that you come across. First order cybernetics, second order cybernetics, right? First order cybernetics, what does the therapist do to the system? Second order cybernetics, what is the therapist doing within the system? You will be able to think that way and think differently regarding it. First order change, second order change, negative feedback loop, positive feedback loops, deviant, amplifying, deviant, decreasing in everything when it comes to how that system works as a whole. Homeostasis, right? Status quo. What does that look like? How do we understand that? That is what I mean when I say think systemically. If you can think systemically, you can answer any type of question that is going to come up on that MFT national exam. Compare your family to it. Look at your family. Look at your siblings. That's how I understood it, okay? If anybody still is having confusion, still struggling to understand it, leave me a message, leave me a comment. I am here to help. I am here to support. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.